CitizenCon Direct 2955 has drawn to a close, and despite being a much more muted affair compared to the unchecked hype of previous years, there was still a lot shown to digest, particularly for the end of 2025 and into 2026. I'm Forrester, and to me, seeing most of what was shown having the ambition to be in our hands before the next CitizenCon comes around was actually rather refreshing, albeit probably doesn't please everybody. So this video will delve into some of the highlights and what that could mean in terms of tangible gameplay. The first spotlight was, somewhat unsurprisingly, on the Nyx system, due to arrive to Star Citizen in an early form in November 2025. This will be a stripped down version of the full system, with additional locations to be added well into 2026, but does mark the welcome return of Levski Landing Area, updated for the modern game. The ongoing storyline will be picked up with new events taking the player to Nyx, as well as some permanent additions, such as a combined arms operation and a rock cracker event. Along with Delamar, a large asteroid belt will also ship with Nyx, the Glacium Ring, which is set to be ripe with mining opportunities for players. And interstellar cargo missions will become a thing too, creating missions for players to transport cargo between systems. In terms of gameplay, this means new areas and new events, but also some meaningful choices for industrial players. Part of the risk of running cargo or mining in Nyx is of NPC attackers who would spawn to engage the player, including, for the first time in the PU, Vanduul forces. That might create a situation where hauling to or mining in Nyx is very profitable, but also more risky, finally giving an economic justification to hire escorts and regular work for those escorts to do. Plus, if manually unloading a whole sea arrives as planned, maybe those escorts can also help to load and unload those 144 32 SCU crates. That's an interesting change, not least because it means players can choose safer options in Stanton, where they're not so likely to deal with threats, or riskier and potentially more profitable operations in Nyx, where combat is more likely as a side effect. Giving meaning to those player choices, to my mind, is a good thing. The next major spotlight was on the Genesys planetary art technology, and it looks good. Viewers were treated to a range of beautiful biomes on the planet Nyx 1, and a description of how some of the new technology will make for more detail, more diversity, and better environment streaming performance at different distances. The team detailed how they plan to start to ship some of that with the Nyx planets in 2026, before moving on to updating Stanton and Pyro locations. In terms of gameplay, there's likely to be limited impact to begin with, as the tech is likely to land with the Nyx planets further down the line. But in the long run, it will mean more interesting places to explore, planets feeling a little more natural, especially at biome transitions, and perhaps some subtle gameplay changes to those who make use of planetary resources. For example, miners may be able to visually identify areas where they think high-value deposits could be found. It'll be interesting to see whether the impact on game performance is positive, or whether it puts more strain on hardware. Time will tell. Then, to nobody's surprise, was the ship spotlight. The team introduced 3 ships, the Anvil Paladin previously concepted, the Esperia Stinger, and the Grey's Shiv, all 3 of which were instantly launched to the PTU as well as the pledge store. The Paladin is looking healthy, going for heavy armour and heavy weapons to produce a beefy brawler, and the multi-crew situation is also interesting, trying to keep a crew of up to 4 as tight-knit as possible. The Stinger also pitches in on the heavy weapons side of things with a long list of weapon slots that would make an F8 raise an eyebrow. Then there's the Shiv, essentially a custom build from an aftermarket enthusiast with pieces bolted together from other ships to create something that looks weird, but performs well for the price. Because it looks weird. If you're interested in finding out more about those ships, be sure to subscribe to this channel, as full review videos will follow once they move to live. Except maybe the Shiv, those buckets don't seem hygienic. The next piece that interested me was a brief update on Tier 0 crafting. If you heard me on the Captain's Table or Launch Sequence podcasts in the run-up to CitizenCon, this would work more or less as I described. A fabricator takes inputted materials of different quality and then outputs weapons or armour on request for a very basic implementation of crafting mechanics. The crafted items were said to be slightly better than shop-bought items, giving a reason to do it. And by granting blueprints as event rewards, the mechanic gives another reason for players to participate in event content. Another reason crafting could be exciting is by introducing an element of resource quality, creating a player market for mined and refined goods, out with simply selling them at a trade kiosk. And as a part-time miner, that's particularly enticing. Thankfully, there was a segment updating on the road to 1.0 from the previous CitizenCon, with the headline being that not much has changed and that work continues, but that instancing would allow for some events to run better, such as Siege of Orison, which will be returning, by limiting player counts and protecting to some extent from unwanted interference. That is likely to be very popular with some players and very unpopular with others, but to me is generally a good thing, as it means that events are more likely to run as intended. Then, the keynote headline feature was on Tactical Strike Groups, a new operation set to launch mid-2026 in the Nyx system. The event will require a large group and potentially good planning, with a mix of ship types to make it all work. It includes plenty of space combat of different types, meaning that fighters and capital ships will all have a place. The particular highlights were the trench run for Star Wars fans, the Vanduul intervention with a large capital ship, and the fact that some large ships, such as the Idris, will start being able to refuel and rearm smaller ships carried in the hangar. Personally, I'm excited to experience the tactical strike groups as something a bit different. Perhaps notable from the relatively short event was what was not included. For me, those were a Perseus update, engineering update, and Squadron 42. Those in the know would know that Squadron 42 was clearly signposted prior to CitizenCon Direct as not to be covered, but given that 2025 was all about focusing company resources on perfecting Squadron 42 ahead of a 2026 release, the fact that no update was given at all seemed a bit of a missed opportunity. Perhaps all the hype is being saved for a 2026 CitizenCon? Time will tell. Likewise, for the Perseus, which many players are excited for. This may also be another tactically delayed reveal, perhaps for IAE 2955 to help bolster Black Friday sales. But as the Perseus is perhaps even more hotly anticipated than any of the other ships showed in the ship segment, it seemed like another missed opportunity. And then there's engineering. It was briefly mentioned as part of the Road to 1.0 as still being worked on, but it's the single biggest gameplay loop for multi-crew ships, and for me, the most exciting thing about Star Citizen that I've been waiting for over 10 years to see. Given that this CitizenCon was all about showing the next 12 months of development, which I certainly approve of, the lack of any large update on engineering was perhaps ominously disappointing. Not least because it's one of the few gameplay elements that's likely to significantly change up how the game will play for a lot of people. Perhaps it's because we've already seen a lot of it and there's no change to what we've seen. I suppose time will tell. I'm sure there are a lot of other things that people were disappointed not to see included, perhaps base building or the Ironclad. I'll be interested to read your thoughts in the video comments. But by and large, I had managed expectations going into CitizenCon this year, and so the event, for me at least, mostly delivered what I thought it would. I'm excited about what will likely get the chance to actually play in the next 12 months, and fingers crossed that what wasn't covered might still be on the cards. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, you might like to do that to let YouTube know you'd like to see more videos like this on your feed, but otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.